I'd love to introduce to the stage one of my heroes in life, Danielle Gano. She, like no one else, can raise awareness around issues and has a network of media professionals who are in the world right now only dedicating their time to trying to raise awareness among millennials and around social causes. So I'd like to invite up to the stage Danielle Gano and her army of good.
Guys, I'm Danielle Gano, and as Rachel so kindly mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of a social impact PR agency here and in Los Angeles. And I'm really excited that Rachel and Public Foundation gave us a platform today to talk about one of the questions that every brand, cause, and media company is trying to solve for, and that's attention span, how to capture it and how to keep it. So I assembled a group of people that know a lot about that, and everyone that's on this panel here right now does that in a very different way. So starting at the end down there, we have Carla Zanoni, who is the audience engagement director for Wall Street Journal, one of the most trusted and respected news sources in the country. Next, we have Patronzio, who is the social impact editor for Mashable, and actually has an entire space within the publication to dedicate to social impact issues and world-changing innovation ideas. Dubbeldam next has a print publication that's quarterly called Darling Magazine, and it's an ad-free publication that has really committed itself to raising the issue of women's self-esteem and creating really beautiful, intelligent content for women. Next we have Mosheh, and I love you, but I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. And he has a long history with CBS in the traditional news space, but has really charted a new course for CBS to create a 24-hour, 7 days a week digital news channel that is available everywhere but your cable box. And then Lisa Filipielloi is with Big Frame, which is a multi-channel network originally started on YouTube that was recently purchased by AwesomenessTV. So she knows a lot about millennials and YouTube channels. And then finally we have Kelly Flynn, and Kelly has really carved a huge space to talk about social impact innovators within CNN. She's the founder of CNN Heroes and an executive producer there. So I'm sure that all of you are very familiar with her work. I would love for all of you guys to just start out by commenting on how you've seen the media landscape change since you've been in your careers, maybe in some of the most impactful ways when it comes to attention span.
I need to push this red button.
Yeah, everyone just has to push the red button to talk.
Well, I've been in my career a long time, and I started at MTV News, and we were having these same conversations about attention span 20 years ago. So what I would like to say is I don't think it's a huge issue. I think if a story is great, young people will pay attention to it. We actually find that our stuff now is too long for the television network, but our mobile site and our digital site are happy to take it at length. I think it's, yes, you have to be careful not to bore people, but I think if it's a compelling, well-told story, my preference is usually in the words of the person's story you're trying to tell. The length isn't a huge issue. Sorry.
I come from traditional, but now I work with mostly YouTube and digitally native creators. And I think that the key thing for storytelling and attention span has to be engagement. What we find with a lot of YouTube creators is they engage on a platform that's really exciting and interesting. They not only make content on YouTube, but they're also utilizing Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram to really connect with their audience. And their audiences can't get enough of them. They're really excited to pay attention to our creators on a large scale basis, whether they're seeing them on tour or going to hear them speak at conferences, or if they're just watching a 3-minute video in their living room. It really is about engaging with that audience and understanding what the millennial wants.
So obviously there's been a lot of evolution recently, and I agree to an extent with Kelly about assumptions. Though ultimately, you know, if the story is good, I mean, sometimes in the digital sector, we'll see completion rates on, you know, 45-minute, 30-minute videos. We see with 60 Minutes, you know, sometimes it's a two-part 60-minute story that's 30 minutes, and 75, 80% of people will sit through the entire story online, which is interesting. That said, at the same time, when there's a compelling story, right now the challenge we have and our goal is to optimize that content for every platform. So there's the traditional broadcast platform, but then how do we take that story and tell it in 6 seconds for Vine, in 15 seconds for Instagram, in a compelling video that will encourage social conversation on Facebook? How do we optimize it for Twitter? So basically each of those will parse out to the various teams and think about the story you're telling and what piece of it may work for each of those platforms.
Coming from a perspective from the magazine industry, you know, just seeing a lot of magazines traditionally painting women in a very, you know, a sexy manner and a very narrow ideal of beauty and sometimes, you know, shallow topics, you know, what we've found is really kind of taking away the gloss of that and what we do with Darlene and saying, you know, how can we go beyond that? How can we push through that and be more vulnerable with the issues that women are really facing? And so for us, I would just say the key thing in the way that it's changed is being vulnerable and saying, no, we all don't feel beautiful every day. Like, no, we're not all perfect. You know, no, we can't all afford that. And just really pushing beyond that wall of media that seems to exist. And I feel like a lot of other people are kind of following suit in that space and providing a much more realistic space for women to engage in a conversation that does feel more real. And it's really exciting to see a lot of the no Photoshop campaigns. Our magazine itself also doesn't Photoshop any of the women's skin or bodies or anything like that. And just seeing that vulnerability and that realness and that rawness is what is helping change the face of the media space for magazines.
I've worked at Mashable for about 3.5 years, which at the company is a relatively long time. In the media landscape, that's less than a minute. But over the course of my short career, I have noticed that, you know, the conversation's becoming a lot more interactive, and it kind of jumps off of what Mosheh was saying. You know, there are all these different platforms, and while we're also, you know, optimizing stories for those different platforms, we're also figuring out how to utilize them within posts. So, you know, we're embedding Vines, we're embedding tweets, we're embedding Instagram posts, we're using GIFs when appropriate. And it's just showing that, you know, we've seen readers are interacting a lot more with our stories. They're staying within the story a lot longer. And, you know, readers don't want to be passive anymore. They want to take action. And that could be just through a tweet regarding a cause that kind of prompts some sort of support.
At the Journal, we're obviously looking at a global audience, but my background has always been community journalism. So coming to the Journal about 6 months ago, that's been my main goal, thinking about how local and community journalism can actually be, take that same model with a global community. And the big piece that I think we all need to remember is that a lot of people talk about creating community. I believe all of the communities already exist. They are already out there, and it's our job to actually figure out how to engage with them and how to tap into that, how to understand the conversation that they want to hear and how they want to be told information, given that education, information, and engagement. That entire flow is pivotal.
And this might not be applicable to all of you guys, but for those of you that it is, how do you balance, you know, covering the subjects that you think are very interesting or you think are really important to the world versus what the, you know, general audience of your outlet is craving and gravitating to and clicking on and sharing?
We were just having this conversation in the hallway about how I do actually a lot of representation of beauty, lifestyle, and fashion creators on YouTube, and how people think it's a little bit shallow, a little bit vapid, but what these women are doing is starting a conversation with a younger girl and letting them know that it's okay to be uncomfortable with who you are, and developing a relationship that makes them feel good about themselves. That what my client is saying about makeup has nothing to do with how pretty a girl is. It has to do with how you feel about yourself and how confident you are. These girls on YouTube are older sisters. They're people that you look to help you feel good about yourself, and they're not making you feel ugly or fat or stupid. They're making you feel really, really good about who you are and having a conversation with you, because you might not have those people to have conversations with in your life, whether that's a mother or a sister. They're sort of a new kind of magazine editor. They're curating interesting content for people and really thinking about things in a different way, and not in a way that's shallow, but it connects with them. And I think people discount millennials and Gen Z as a really passive, selfish group of people, but they care, and they activate and they engage, and it's really amazing to see.
I mean, I think one of the challenges in national media has always been, to the extent, you can refer to it simply as ensuring that you can give people their broccoli along with their chocolate, is at the same time, you want to cover the important things, the things going on internationally, things going on in politics in various sectors, but at the same time not ignore, things happening in pop culture. So I think that's a continuing balance, and we have various programs and outlets that rebalance it in different ways. Though, to Lisa's point, one of the incredible things that we found is, two of the stories that have gotten the most traction in the past couple months. One was a series we did where we went inside Saudi Arabia and talked about women's rights inside Saudi Arabia, women who are trying to drive, that sort of thing. At the same time, what also did incredibly well was Llamas on the Loose in Arizona. And it's balancing those stories, and I think with all these new outlets we have, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or whatever, we have a number of ways to engage and tell all the stories that are interesting in the world and compelling, but at the same time, at our core, at least at CBS, it's ensuring we're doing those investigative pieces, or a week ago on 60 Minutes, following up on the 2011 story of the Syrian children who underwent the chemical attack, and following up and getting new video. So I think as long as we're looking at it holistically and ensuring that we're informing as well as entertaining of sorts.
It's no secret that at CNN, it's not necessarily the first thing you'll see in every hour, a human interest or a social impact story. But I will give them credit for, when we started this 10 years ago, carving out space in the network to make these stories happen. And I want to thank the younger generation and digital for helping save us, because this week we're trying to get a 2-minute story on our 2 heroes of the year who are in Nepal on the air, and we're having a hard time getting it through with Baltimore. But on mobile and on digital, it's getting tons of exposure. So, I think we're lucky because we do something that people do within networks and in media in general. They like the sheen of the good work that we do, and that's always a good guilt card to throw down. You're not going to kill the thing that, we're talking about good things in the world. And I think that allows us to survive. And also, I think sponsors' interest in content like this is not, is not a small part of how it survives. But I think that digital is actually helping keep it going.
We've also found that blending topics is really helpful. So say take something like fashion or beauty or home, things that women care about that could be sometimes considered shallow. So with an article about fashion and clothing, we would have a conversation about it, have an excellent fashion editorial, and then at the end, ask an important question like, but how do you feel about your body? Do you love your body, and how are you actively working towards that? Or something like beauty, we can feature a beauty cream or something and then talk about it within that. But how do you feel about yourself and are you envious of other people? Are you jealous? Do you give comments or compliments to your friends about how beautiful they are? Or are you only focused on how beautiful you are and being competitive with other women? Or if you're talking about home, a lot of women are competitive about their home, or just, different bloggers or Instagrammers where there's a lot of envy. I can't afford that, or I can't have that. Having a conversation there too, where it's, are you caring about the people that you invite into your home? Are you having intentional conversation? Are you talking about things that matter with people, or are you talking about things that are shallow? So it's taking those topics that are really sticky and flashy and sexy and also blending them with deeper issues in the same space, in the same article, or in the same video that has seemed to really work for us.
I would just add, social good is essential to Mashable's mission. So, and obviously I'm in charge of coverage surrounding social good, so it's a bit of a unique experience. But the thing that I always have to remind myself, oddly, of is, I'm a reader too. I care about these topics for a reason. And if I'm genuinely interested in a topic, I assume my readership will also be, and if I'm not, my reader will tell. So that's something that I consider before tackling any story. And, I think it works out for the most part.
I would tag on to that and say that a big part of making sure that we have that kind of communication is creating engagement with our readers before we're asking them to do anything. And I think for a large majority of media outlets, we just kind of use social media and these tools to broadcast our information rather than having an actual conversation. This weekend, when the earthquake hit Nepal, it was a big moment for us globally as a social media desk to do social journalism, actually listening to what was taking place before our traditional reporters were actually able to get on a plane and get on the ground. Some of our reporters were actually turned around when there was an aftershock and hampered the reporting process. So actually having a community that we are constantly communicating with and building that engagement on a regular basis rather than just parachuting in and having a conversation, trying to figure out what's happening, has been really important. Also providing information that's out there. When Facebook and Google launched their Person Finder tool, and I forget what Facebook's tool was called, but that was a huge piece. I saw our community saying, I have friends who are climbing Everest. I have no idea if they're okay. Connecting them to those tools and bringing them that information has been a huge piece for us, where we're not necessarily a social good organization. The Wall Street Journal is not in that business. We're in the business of educating and informing, and that's how we make our way in that landscape.
And so whether it's been something that you've personally worked on or something that you've seen just really shake up the media landscape, what would you guys say are the most interesting ways that you guys have seen causes interact with the media? And if we can skip the ice bucket challenge, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll go first again. I represent a client called Tyler Oakley. If you're under 30, you probably have no idea who he is. But he's a huge celebrity on YouTube. He has almost 7 million subscribers and a social reach of about 20 million. He interned for the Trevor Project about 4 years ago when he was still starting to make YouTube videos and wasn't a huge name. He raised money for his birthday. The first year he raised $10,000. The next year he decided to do it again for his 24th birthday to raise $24,000. He exceeded expectations and raised $26,000, which was great. And then last year he was like, I'm gonna go for $150,000. He shocked everybody and raised $525,000. This year he did it again and he raised $536,000. He is now the biggest donor to the Trevor Project, over $1 million. He activated his community to really get behind this group. And if you're not familiar with the Trevor Project, what they do is they're a suicide prevention line for crisis teens, LGBTQ youth. It's a really important cause and one that's really not focused on much in the US, but it's mostly straight 13 to 17-year-old girls who are donating to this cause, which is a really beautiful and powerful thing. So he's activating this community to make them aware of something that they're not aware of, and using them to raise a lot of money and get people excited about that. And that's been something that we've done for a couple of years. It's been super impactful, and I love when people say, like, millennials don't do anything or they don't do whatever, and it's like, we have a lot of proof to say that that's totally false.
Just a couple things I've seen recently that got our attention, just because there's so much out there, is a couple causes that take advantage of memes that are out there that people are talking about. So one example that I thought, and we ended up covering, was the whole dress that nobody knew whether it was white or gold or blue or black, that the world decided was the most important story in the world for like 24 hours.
Can I say that was started by a YouTuber?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So there you go. So, and actually it took place just after we cared about llamas for 6 hours, and then we thought we did, but then they're like, no, the internet now cares about this dress. So I think it was less than 48 hours later that the Salvation Army of South Africa put out an image of a woman wearing the dress saying, let's talk about black and blue, and it was a domestic violence push. And basically, regulating on the world, being like, you guys are having fun with this, but this is actually, there's a serious issue here. And it led us to do a couple stories on it, and I thought that was a pretty smart way to approach. I mean, listen, domestic violence is a significant issue, but getting it on the, getting it to CBS and national news organizations is challenging, because we're always looking for a new approach or some new statistic or some new, sometimes it's a celebrity who's getting behind the cause. So I thought that was a free, they just put out a photo and it went viral. And another thing actually, and this obviously is slightly more challenging, but yesterday I had never heard of the Vienna-based men's magazine Vanguardist before. But yesterday they put out an issue printed with HIV-positive ink. So they took the blood of 3 HIV-positive individuals, somehow mixed it together, and they did a cover. And what they were trying to draw attention to was the fact that HIV is up 80% in diagnosis globally over the last 10 years, which I wasn't aware of, because it seems domestically that outside of the story in Indiana recently, it seems like it's kind of gone, or at least is not as an urgent issue as it used to be. So anyway, obviously that's much more complex, the science of that, than what the Salvation Army of South Africa did. But again, an innovative, different way to approach your story to get the attention of the media.
This was quite a while ago, but Charity Water did a really interesting photo campaign where they featured these yellow containers that the people have to use to walk to get water in developing countries, and they took photos of them and then contrasted them with businessmen in New York in suits going to Central Park and getting water out in the same containers, and then kids in private schools holding water bottles that were full of muddy water, or women in their homes that were really beautiful in a dress just holding, like a champagne glass full of dirty water. And just to give that visual impact, for some reason, whenever I think of the water crisis, that image pops into my head, and I just think that innovation of comparing our world and our reality with other people's realities is really, really impactful, especially if it's done visually.
I'm always really impressed by simple awareness campaigns that tackle, very complicated issues. And one that sticks out in my mind is from earlier this year. It was called the Smear for Smear campaign, and it was spearheaded by Joe's Cancer Trust in the UK. And it was basically women would put lipstick on and smear it a little bit, and then use the hashtag, or take a selfie and use the hashtag Smear for Smear, encouraging women everywhere to get pap smears and get screened for cervical cancer, which is the third most common cancer worldwide. And it, really spread awareness about this very, obviously complicated and large-scale problem. But it also, just showed that, it can be a simple thing that gains traction and really targets youth. This was all over Instagram, and in January, Pew found that I believe it was 53% of young adults aged 18 to 29 who were using the internet were using Instagram. So it really, it was strategic, and it was smart, and it was visual also, and that really impressed me, and I think that shows the impact that a small campaign like that can have.
I think the work that the Human Rights Campaign did, reaching out to folks and asking them to change their logos to a pink and red version of the HRC logo was just brilliant. Bringing people in, it's visual, it's tapping into community, it's creative, it's fun, and had a ripple effect that can be tracked through social, through online communities, and had a great impact.
I don't have one campaign in particular that I'm talking about, but we found that oftentimes if there's a quantifiable action that can be taken, there's a woman who produces solar suitcases, sends them to Africa to help maternity wards be lit for babies to be born. They're $1,000 a suitcase, but she got more donations than a lot of other people that we've featured because people could put together $1,000 makes this thing. Or the little girl who was dying of cancer in California who made joy jars for other children who had cancer. And, each jar costs a certain amount. And I feel like quantifying things that way can often really help it spread and get results.
So we only have a couple minutes left, but really quickly, for any of the causes and campaigns and organizations that are in the room, how can they keep your attention?
Oh, I'll start. Surprise me. I mean, I'm also a reader. If you're going to pitch me or you're going to want me to read your story, show me why this cause is poised to change lives. A Christian was talking about this earlier. Millennials are wary. I'm wary. Covering social good has made me cynical in a way, and I don't think necessarily in a bad way. Just wary of cause washing and failed promises. So basically, I want to see stories that are high impact and low ego.
Completely second everything you're saying. Especially speaking about Nepal again, there was a lot of concern about which organizations we reported on in terms of relief efforts because of that kind of fear factor in reporting on this topic. I think, back to what I was saying earlier, create a relationship with your audience, with us as journalists, and have it be a long-term relationship, not one that is only based on an ask. That authenticity will really come through. And when you have a breaking news situation or you have a specific event that you want to organize around, you'll have that bond with the journalists who are reporting on this, and also understand our language. So understand the language of our audience and understand the language of the media outlet that you're pitching, so that they are apt to publish something that's truly a collaborative effort and makes sense.
To Carla's point, understand the medium. When it comes to TV, obviously, always have the visuals in mind. Will be much more, whether it's photos or video, that's one aspect of it. So always be thinking about that as you push your cause. Well, let me tell you about, what sorts of visuals you'll get or what visuals we've already recorded. And the other aspect is we're storytellers. So we want to help us tell that story through the eyes of an individual as opposed to some larger issue, which it's hard to encapsulate in a 90-second or 2-minute or even 10-minute story. We need to tell it through the eyes of somebody who's experienced it. So, and frankly, pitch it in less than 30 seconds or four sentences, and you have us.
I was just going to say, be concise. Yeah. Tell me in 140 characters or less what we need to be doing. I think there are so many campaigns. I just saw one recently that I read it, the like 7-page brief, and I was like, this is 2 sentences that needed to be told to me. Do it that way. Tell us in 2 sentences how we can make a change, how we can do something good. I think every cause is incredibly important, and I could literally talk about YouTube for days, but nobody wants me to do that. And I'm sure you can talk about your causes for days, but don't do that. Tell us quickly, sufficiently, what can we do to get involved, and how can we make it happen quickly?
Of course, I echo the storytelling and finding an individual through whom to tell the story, and nominate a hero at cnnheroes.com.
Good plug. Thank you guys all so much for being a part of this conversation and lending your own expertise and experience to this. And thanks again to Rachel and Public.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Wall Street Journal, Mashable, Darling Magazine, CBS News, Big Frame, and CNN. Thank you so much for teaching us about storytelling.